Okay, folks, we're back. Sorry, my family came home and I had to shoo them away. Okay, so where do we leave off? We're talking about 1090s, new Eastern Emperor, right? Alexius, Alexius, Komnenus, Comnenus, the first, right? He's got a Greek version of that name as well too, but this is the one we're using. So there's a rise of a new group of Islamic warriors and people, and they're settling around what is the kingdom, right? The area that they will eventually, well, they'll dominate and they will give their name to it. And this group of people is called the Seljuk Turks, right? Seljuk, Turk, Turk. And they are dominant. They have not a caliphate, but a sultanate. Okay, their leader is the Sultan in this area here. And the what Komnenos has done is he's consolidated. He's fought many holding battles against the Turks, but neither side can win a massive victory. The Turks know that they can't possibly take over Constantinople, and Komnenos, the emperor, knows that he can't possibly muster enough men, army, to go down and retake the Holy Land. So, what does he do? He sends a letter. Okay, let me get to my notes, make sure we're all in the right spot here. Okay, all right. Okay, so he sends a letter to the West. And who does he send it to? He sends it to the Pope. He doesn't send it to a king or an emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, or anything like that. He sends it to Rome. He sends it to the Pope. Okay? And that happens in the year, around the year 1094. Okay, what the heck is in this letter that he sends to the Pope? Around the year 1094, okay? It's not like a get well letter or hey, come visit me and let's hang out letter. Remember, the churches are split. They've been split at this point for almost 50 years now. Okay, there's a Greek Orthodox Church in the East, and then there's the Western Roman Catholics. Okay, he basically says to the Pope, I've heard of this group of people that you have, these warriors, knights, and what he's asked for is he says, if you send me like 200 to 300 of these knights, I will put them in my armies, and with their help, I will be able to defeat this Islamic horde, right? These Islamic armies, and take back the Holy Land. Okay, and he believes that with like 200 or 300 of these guys, he can, win the tide of battle. Because he knows these guys, these knights, are heavily armored. Their horses are heavily armored. These guys are professional killers. They're professional soldiers. Just if you mass even like 20 of them together, they're the tanks on the battlefield. They can smash through most formations. That's not how the Arabs usually fight. The Arabs usually fight, especially the Turks, with like riding on horse, lightly armored, barely armored, shooting arrows, things like that. But he believes that this will work. And to entice the Pope a little bit, he dangles a little carrot. He basically says, if you do this and we take back the Holy Land, I will allow pilgrims to come. Obviously, even though I'm not Roman Catholic, I will allow pilgrims to come and worship in Jerusalem, in the Holy City. We will get rid of this evil Muslim scourge. And also, there might be a chance that we could unify the churches again. And so if you're the Pope and you get this letter, what do you think? Well, think, hey, it's pretty good, okay? The Pope at the time is a guy named, excuse me, Urban II. Okay, so the Pope's name is Urban II, Urban II, okay? He sees this, and he does what a lot of people do. They read more into it than there's actually there. So he basically is saying this is it, because if he's able to unify the churches again, not only will the churches be one grand Christian church again, but he will be seen as the person who did it. He will be the Pope over, he's conveniently forgetting that there's still the Patriarch in Constantinople, remember? Not the Pope, but, their head person in Constantinople, the Greek Orthodox Church. And he's thinking, I'm thinking that he's thinking, oh my goodness, this is it. This will solidify my place in history. So there's a little bit of pride there, obviously, a little bit of pride there. Like, if I can do this, this will be a major diplomatic coup. This will have this will reverberate throughout history. This will be incredible. So he, in the very next year, in 1095, right? So he gets the letter. In the very next year, in 1095, he calls together a giant council, a giant conference in the south of France, in the little tiny, it's like a little place. It's not even a big city at all, called Clermont, okay? Clermont, Cleremont, the Council of Clermont. And so there are thousands of people there that show up. There's everyone from high nobles, kings, all the way down to just, the regular person, ditch diggers. And he basically tells them this: hey, I heard from the Eastern Roman Emperor. He wants us to go rescue the Holy Land for him. If we do, we will be able to unify the church, and we'll finally be able to destroy the menace that is the Muslims. We'll finally be able to destroy them and bring back the holy places of our faith. And he, entices them and gets them all fired up even more, like how, stories of, like how Christian pilgrims go there and they get tortured and they get murdered by the Muslims that are there, and they're being crucified, just like he stokes the fires. And so I think, some of the sources even report, and what I think as well too, is that he maybe was thinking to himself, oh man, maybe I bit off a little more I can chew, because the fervor that gets kicked off by this council is incredible. It's just unbelievable. Basically, these thousands of people that are there, they're whipped up into this religious frenzy of this orgy of like religious mania, where they believe, we are the knights of Christ, we are the fighters, it's our duty, it's our sacred vow to march over there and destroy the infidel, destroy these heretics once and for all. They've controlled the holy places for over 500 years. It's time to go take them back. And so he's like, okay, great. Urban's like, okay, awesome. So he gives them a command. He tells them, go off back to where you come from, spread the word, spread the message, and in a year, we'll meet back here and you guys will go, okay? And that's exactly what happens. But he, just like what Alexius did, he spices up the offer a little bit as well too, okay? And what he does, make sure I'm gonna write it down correctly, is he offers what's called a okay. Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Always misspell these things. Okay. What he does, as to spice up the pot a little bit, is he tells these people, I am going to, as the head of the Roman Catholic Church, I'm going to offer you something else. I will offer you what's called a plenary indulgence. Okay, that's Plenary. An indulgence. Now I want you to pay attention to this word, indulgence. Indulgence. This is just like we talked about simony and usury and all these other ones. This is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back in 500 years for the Roman Catholic Church. But he offers this. It's called the plenary indulgence, and what it is basically it's a forgiveness of sins if you agree to crusade. Okay, so basically, no matter what you've done in the past, if you murdered some guy, nobody ever found out about it, or you slept with your brother's wife, or you stole something, or you whatever multitude of things that you've done that you shouldn't have done. If you become a crusader, or what it was called, take the cross, and you march the Holy Land and you fight, you are forgiven. The slate is wiped clean. All that stuff that you did, God forgives it. Okay, I am his representative, I forgive it. Okay, if you die on the crusade, which some of you probably will, you're a martyr. You're going to go to heaven. You will immediately, all that stuff will be wiped away. The slate will be wiped clean. You will go to heaven. If you don't die and you make it back, once again, the slate is wiped clean. Well, when you're a person and your entire life, you're living in the year 1100, your entire life is attached to this idea of religiosity. That is one of the best things you could hear. You know, especially if you're not such a great guy. You know, you've tried to live a good life, or maybe you've led the worst life imaginable. All you got to do is take the cross, go to the Holy Land, fight against the Muslims, live or die, you're going to heaven. Okay? So, in a year, so in 1096, even Urban doesn't know what's going to happen. Tens of thousands of people, soldiers, show up. Okay? They've sewn the cross. You know, when we see like old pictures of like knights, we see the cross all over the place. But we really start seeing it now. It's the mark that you are a crusader. You have now marched from one end of the known world to the next, and you're fighting for the, you know, the glory of God. And so he is, even Urban is taken aback by this. The idea is that, you know, he thought maybe there's going to be a couple thousand that show up, but there's about 40,000 men that show up, which is a huge number at this time period. This is a major number. They're not all knights. About 8,000 of them, 8 to 9,000 of them are knights, high impact, trained, professional knights. The rest are like men at arms, sergeants at arms, you know, regular soldiers that either support the knights or do their own thing. You have archers, you have just regular squires that are helping the knights, and then you have all the other people that follow along, all of the baggage train that's following along behind. And Urban blesses them, does what he's, you know, blesses them, says, okay, you're all going to you're all going to get your sins wiped away. You're all going to be set good, and they take off. Now, this is a largely French operation. Okay, the vast majority of the people that show up come from France, including about 90% of the knights that show up, because that is really the heart of chivalry in Europe at this point. You have the peripheries like the Holy Roman Empire and England and all that. But France is kind of basically where this is situated. Okay, so I'm going to give you the leaders of the crusade, the crusading leaders. Okay, so they set off in the year 1096, and they have to figure out how to get there. The maps are not so great, but they have a general idea of where to go, kind of south and kind of to the east. All right, so the leaders of the expedition. Here we go. Okay, so the four leaders of the expedition are Godfrey Bouillon, Robert II of Flanders, Raymond IV of Toulouse, and Bohemond of Taranto. So these three are French. This guy, he's down south here in Italy. He is a distant relative of William the Conqueror. He's a Norman, okay, who they also popped up here in southern Italy because they were, remember, descendants of Vikings. They all set off with their men and they go. Now, The rich ones, so usually the nobles, they can afford what? They can afford passage by ship, okay? And there's plenty of ships that are only all too eager to take their money and ship them off there, because you got to take your horse, you got to take all your baggage, you got to take all your entourage, all the people that look after you, everything else. But that's only for the rich, okay? Well, by ship, that passage takes about a month and a half, okay? The vast majority of them are not rich, and so what do they got to do? They got to go on foot, and so you go the shortest way, okay? And that's, now they meet up in different areas, okay? They don't all just meet up in one spot and then go. You got some meeting here, some meeting here, and some meeting here, okay? Some go by sea, some go by the land route. For the most part, it takes them, the vast majority, a year to get there, okay? So you can't just hop on the red eye and be in Constantinople in 12 hours. It takes them a year, okay? And some, obviously they lose through attrition, they lose a couple thousand guys along the way. Guys either just drop out, or they say, nah, I've changed my mind, or they get killed or whatever. They just, wander off, they go missing. What's amazing about the First Crusade is that once again, it spreads this religious hysteria, this mania throughout all of Europe. And so even before all of these soldiers set out, you have a group of people. That set out before that, and they're called the People's Crusade. They're led by a guy named Peter the Hermit, and he's just a local guy from France, and he is basically saying we're all warriors of Christ, we should all go fight. And so he starts wandering around the countryside, and pretty soon he has a small little army of just regular people. He even has children with him, he's got women, he's got anybody who follows him. They wear the white shirt of the penitent, the person who has asked God for forgiveness. They don't have any weapons, they don't have any armor. And they're one step ahead of the major crusade, of the actual army. And they keep going. So now, I want you to picture yourself. It's now 1098, okay? You sent off this letter, about 3 years ago to the Pope, okay? You didn't really hear anything back. You thought, whatever. And all of a sudden, your advisors come running into the throne room there in Constantinople, and they're like, Your Imperial Highness, you got to come look at this. And you're like, what? And you go to the city walls, and what do you see out there? You see an army of people wearing white shirts, and it's an army of women and children and old people and sick people, and you're floored by this. You're like, what the hell is this? I don't understand. I sent off for 200 knights, and this is what they send me? And what are they doing? They're like locusts. They've done what they've done throughout Europe is, yeah, they're marching to the Holy Land, but they're going across the countryside, they're stealing from me, they're doing whatever, because they're just a rabble. It's not an army, it's a rabble. It's a confused mass of people that have made it here, okay? These pilgrims and lunatics and everything else that have, shown up for whatever reason. Well, he gives them some food, and he tells them, go home, go away. Peter the Hermit and the other ones, the other leaders of this people's army, they say, no, we're going to defeat the infidel, the Muslims. Okay, this is what the Byzantine Empire looks like. All right, around the year 1100. And he says, if you go over there, they will kill you. You cannot last. You're not an army. And they say no, and they start getting a little feisty. And he says, okay, fine. And he puts them on his ships. He ships them across, right, the Bosphorus here. He lands there. And imagine that, in those first few days, you have to imagine, like, if you were a scout for the Muslim armies there, the Turks, and you're like looking at this, and you know where Constantinople is, and you're expecting an army, and you see these group of people coming. They're singing, they're dancing, they believe that, the light of Christ is going to protect them from arrows and swords, and you're like, these people are kind of crazy. What the heck is this? Or these Christians are loonies. What's going on? And so they go back and report it, and they, the higher ups come out like, what's going on? And so what happens is exactly what the emperor, Alexius, said would happen. The majority of them are killed, and then the rest are taken into captivity and sold as slaves in the markets all along North Africa. And Alexius is like, I don't know what that was. But then about a month later, these guys come running into the imperial throne room once again, and they're like, you gotta come see this. He goes, oh no, what is it? This time he goes out there, instead of just this rabble, a bunch of wandering people, what's finally caught up? The actual army. And remember, he was expecting like 200-300 knights. He looks out there, and encamped across the entire plain around his city, right, are tens of thousands, up to almost 40,000 as soldiers. These guys are real soldiers. They've got their tents and everything else. You can see they've got massive war horses. There's armor. These guys are real soldiers. And he starts freaking out a little bit. Like, because once again, this was not what he was looking for. But number two, he's like, yes, they're Christian, but Western Europe has not been the ally of Eastern Europe here for a long time. So he's worried about this. So he does not allow the gates to be open, brings all his people in. He calls for those a group of men, the group of 4 men. He brings them in the throne room, and he says, basically tells them, I am the emperor here. You might be kings and dukes and princes where you came from, but you're beneath me here. He expects them, and he has them all lined up there in front of him on their knee, right? On their knees in front of him. And he says, I'm the emperor here. I call the shots. This is my empire. I am the continuation of the Roman Empire. So I don't know what the Pope told you, but this is what I'm telling you. And what I'm telling you is that I'm glad you're here. I will give you food. I will give you supplies. I will use my navy to ship you across like I did with those other poor fools. I will give you maps, and my navy will go down the coastline with you, okay, as you fight, and the object is to take the holy city. And they're like, great, that's why we're here, perfect, and they're like, and he goes, but one condition, I did not expect that 40,000 of you were going to show up here. Do not believe that this land will now become yours once you take it from them. This land belongs to me. This belongs to the Eastern Empire. And so before he lets them go, he forces them to swear loyalty, not to the Pope, but to who? To him. Basically telling them, whatever you take back, it's ours. This has been Eastern Roman, right, Byzantine territory before you guys were born. Well, what do they all do? They all agree to it. But it's clear that their agreement is made. It is not faithful, that they're not here for him. They're here to release, as they see it, release this territory, this holy land from this evil invader, from this Muslim tyrant, whatever it might, whatever Muslims are, they don't care. The idea is that the Christians don't own it. But there's still that distrust. Remember, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. There's still that major distrust. There's that uneasiness. They don't trust each other, even though they're both Christians. These two groups of people don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They look at suspicion through this whole process with each other. And so they pledge that they will. And so he does. He gives them food. He gives them material. And he's totally okay when he tells his commanders, get them on the boats, get them over there. Follow along, just like he said, follow along the shorelines. If they need help, help them, okay? But he wants them out of there because he realizes once again that this is not just like that last force of just a bunch of lunatic people. He, with mass religious hysteria, he believes that, this is a sizable force. So it could be any day that they decide, instead of to fight the Muslims, they decide to fight me. So he wants them gone. And so he does. He ships them across and they fight. Now, when the Turks see them for the first time, they're like, wow, these guys, they came to play this time. And the Crusaders win battle after battle. Now this is all foreign territory. None of these people have ever been here before. It's all foreign territory. And the further they get and the more southern they get, it's turning into what? Desert, okay? This is totally unlike the countryside of France, okay? turning into desert. So I want you to picture that. You're a knight, and you've got about 65 to 75 pounds of armor on you. It's getting pretty toasty. Even with your chainmail, whatever it might be, it's getting pretty toasty. But their capabilities as warriors are more than adequate for this job. And so whatever, ideas have been kicked around over time. Like, did the Turks not take them seriously? Were the Turks just completely overmatched? Were the Muslim armies just not ready to go? And I think it was a little bit of all those things. The idea is that no matter where they fought, the Crusaders won. They crushed them. Okay, and those knights were really the impetus behind the victory. They fight a major battle here in Antioch, which is in Syria now, modern day Syria, that's 1098. And by the time they get to 1099, they make it to the walls of Jerusalem. So 1099. So this whole story started about 5 years earlier with that letter. Okay. They set out around 1097, and about a year and a half, almost 2 years later, they make it to the walls of Jerusalem. Here's the holy city. The problem is that Jerusalem is not like a fort. It's not. It's a walled city. It's a strong city, but it's not some like fort, or like a castle where there's only military people in there. It's a city, and inside the city are tens of thousands of just regular people, civilians. And they all live together. They all do what they've done for generations. They trade with each other, and they keep to themselves, and they do their thing. You've got Muslims there, obviously, because they're the ones who control it politically. The government is all Islamic. But then you have Christians there, and you've got Jews there, and you have other people there that are just there. And now they're trapped inside the city, because now spreading out around them are the crusading armies. And so they fight. They launch a siege against the city. It takes about, it's in the summer, okay? So it's the high point of the heat in the desert there. And they fight. It takes about a month and a half. And eventually the walls, they scale the walls, and they make it into the city. And what do? Did they just go and round up, are you a Muslim? No, they commit some mass slaughter. And that's what really happened in siege warfare in the Middle Ages. It didn't matter if the city was your own and you're taking it back. The idea was that you gave a couple responses to the people who were besieged. The commanders, you basically said, give up now. And if they did, then you just let them out, and your army just rolled in there. If they didn't, the longer the siege went, the more nerves would get frayed and people would be pissed. Now, the benefit for any defender in a siege is how long can you make the outside attacking army, the besieging army, stay out there. And that was one of the few weapons you had, because you're usually outnumbered. But if you lasted long enough, eventually disease would start to wipe out the attacking army. But in 2 months, disease did not attack. It hit them, but not enough that it stopped the army, and they flooded in there, and now these guys just went nuts. Knights, everybody included. They just started killing en masse. They slaughtered almost the entire population in the city. Indiscriminately. They killed men and women and children. They killed old people. They killed Muslims. They weren't stopping to see what you were. They just killed. So they killed Muslims. They killed Christians. They killed Jews. They killed anybody who was just unfortunately caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Even people that had run to like churches and things like that, they dragged them out and killed them. Until in an orgy of violence that lasted several days, until finally enough knights were like, what are we doing? And they would, put their men around certain groups of people and basically say like, no, you can't, keep slaughtering these people. That's not what we're here for. But the First Crusade ends in a triumph, in a victory. They take it. Do they give any of it back to the Byzantines? No, not at all. They keep it, and they create what's called the Crusader states. And here we have a map of them. So they set up Like here, the biggest one, most important one is the Kingdom of Jerusalem, obviously centered in Jerusalem. The county of Tripoli, surrounded in Tripoli. The Principality of Antioch in Antioch, as well as Aleppo up here, and then the county of Edessa and the Armenian Cilicia. The biggest one, like I said, is the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Godfrey is the top guy, and they say, so are you going to be king now? And he goes, no, absolutely not. There's only one king of Jerusalem, and that's Jesus Christ. And I am ruling in his stead. So he becomes like the Lord Protector over Jerusalem. But what do the knights do? They do what they did back in Europe. They set up castles all over the place, and they carve this out. Now, the First Crusade is one of about 11 crusades that happened in the history of Europe, dealing with the Levant here. And this one, for all intents and purposes, is the only, for what it set out to do, is the only successful one. In the Second Crusade, the major players, the army falls apart because the Holy Roman Emperor dies. They do take back a couple cities in Spain because they're on their way, right? The rich ones are on their way to the Holy Land. They stop in Spain. There's Muslims here. Let's fight them. That's successful. But all the way through the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, all the way for the next couple hundred years, they all fail at it. So within 100 years, that happens in 1099, within 100 years, Jerusalem is back in the hands of the Muslims again. The Crusaders are booted out, and one by one, all of their Crusader states and all their castles, like Kerak, Montreal, Acre, Tyre, there's Tyre again, Beirut, Tripoli, Homs, Crac de Chevalier, all these get snuffed out. They all get taken by the Muslims again. So in the end, 100 years later, and that's why we see more and more crusades, because within 100 years, the first, most of the first stuff is getting taken, especially the key, the crown jewel, the one that they're all fighting for, Jerusalem. This city, this holy city that all three of them want, the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians. That one gets taken back by the Muslim armies again, and this was the only one that you could say in any real terms was successful. Other crusades that come along, there's battles that are won, and treaties that are settled between the Crusaders and the Muslim armies there, and we're going to be talking about an important crusader by next week, another one in the Third Crusade. But the First Crusade is it. That's the one. But once again, this is the first time really where we see, like in the ancient world, people might have been killed because they didn't believe in the right gods at the right time. But for the first time, as part of this European identity, and this consolidation of a central authority, all of this has now come up to this culmination by the time you get to the turn of the century, 1100, where impetus is put on fighting someone based sheerly, it's not just a cultural and ethnic thing. They're not killing these people because they have darker skin. They're killing and fighting because of the idea of religion, they don't believe in what I believe in, and I've been taught to fight and hurt those people. Because to the Crusader at the time, killing someone that doesn't believe in you, it's not considered murder. It's considered, it's holy war. It's destroying the enemy because he doesn't believe or she doesn't believe in how you believe in. So it's not considered murder. You are sending their souls to hell, where they belong, and you are getting one step closer to heaven. And so, like, even to the Eastern Romans, the Byzantines, the idea of, because priests and everything were showing up, there was entire orders with like priests where they had taken vows as priests and they were fighting. And to the Eastern Romans, to the Byzantines, this was like, what? our religious people don't do that. You can't go smash somebody's head in and still profess to be a priest. It just doesn't work that way. But it was different in the West. That was religion and warfare were hand in hand, and they're going to be completely hand in hand for a very, very, very long time. And it's all going to be guided by, this central authority that we see that is, spreading throughout, especially Western Europe, okay? Because we see the majority of these people came from the Kingdom of France, okay? And you're going to see kings and queens even that go on crusades on the next ones that show up, okay? All right, but quickly to wrap up with this, just like we've seen numerous times in the past, what is the one benefit between the crusades? Well, yeah, you get mass slaughter, which is a terrible thing, and then especially in the name of religion. But like we've seen in the past, you get, once again, a mixture between East and West. So if you're a crusader and you've survived and you make it back to your hometown, you've seen things that people can't even rationalize. You've now met up with other cultures, everything else. You've talked to people that speak different languages, worship different gods, whatever it might be. And for this has been since the time of the Romans. So Romans at this point have been gone for 600 years. We're starting to see an opening now, once again, an opening and a mixture between East and West. And people are starting to see what the East, once again, has to offer that they've been held back from, that they didn't even know about for a very long time. So we see the beginnings of more trade routes and everything else, once again, from the East to the West. So merchants and shipping people are going to the East, to these Crusader states. They're packing up their ships with stuff that you cannot get in Europe, like pepper and fragrant flowers and all this other stuff, and they're shipping it back here, and they're selling it to the people that can afford it. Now, at the beginning, only the rich people, the nobles, can afford it. But eventually, this type of stuff becomes part and parcel of just life. You know what pepper is. You know what, whatever this certain spice is, or this fabric, silk, or whatever it might be. You start to see, you can't maybe afford it, but at least you know about it. And so we see, once again, one of the lasting contributions of the Crusaders is this mixture of East and West, especially when it comes to trade. But not only that, folks, once again, we see an unlocking a renewed interest in the ancient history, because remember, all that was controlled by the Romans, and the Romans stole a lot of their stuff from the Greeks. Who's controlling it in those areas? The Muslims. They have vast libraries and book repositories, and they have scholars and everything else. What will the Crusaders show up there? A bunch of other Europeans show up after the fighting's done. So you got scholars and you've got religious people and everything else. And for the first time in a long time, for the first time in hundreds of years, they're now privy to and exposed to the wisdom of the ancients, right? The wisdom of the Greeks and the Romans, which the Muslims kept, especially like in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, or even one of the great cities in the world was like Baghdad at the time. They're seeing all this, and so not only are economic things going back, trade goods and spices and stuff like that to Europe, but what else is going to Europe now? A newfound awakening, newfound sense of ideas, right? Some new ideas, but most importantly, old ideas that have been lying there dormant in this place that was so far away from Europe, and now it's back. So we're talking about like astronomy, we're talking about medicine, right? The human anatomy. I love this drawing because you've got the student cutting into the body, and then you've got these guys not paying attention. Then you've got the doctore, or the teacher, so they're teaching them about it. Then you got the little dog ready, waiting for some scraps. Okay, but yeah, you got medicine. They're learning about theology. They're learning about all the stuff they didn't know about their own religion. They're learning about writing. They're learning about philosophy, rhetoric, all this stuff that's been that's been hidden away, and now it's there. now you have an opportunity to get to it. Okay, so the Crusades, militaristically, in the long run, were colossal failures, except for that first one. It achieved its objective, but when it comes to these other offshoots, they were highly successful. It was a a secondary thing. No knight was setting off saying, "Geez, I hope we open up the east or the west." No, but that's just what happens with people. They learn new things, they experience new things, and they bring it back and they talk about it. And slowly but surely, these things became commonplace in Europe. Okay, it became commonplace. And then let's see here. Are we going to talk about that? Yeah, we'll talk about this. I'll talk about this next week. Okay, folks, so that is it for this week. I hope everything's going okay with you. And I know everybody's super busy. Make sure that you are starting to figure out who you want to write your paper about and who you want to record your thing about. Remember, the sky's the limit when it comes to those recordings. I've given you a ton of examples of what people have done in the past. Have fun with it. You know, if we're going to have some kind of fun this year, I guess, do something like that. Okay. All right. I will talk to you guys later. I will see you next week. Stay safe. Ciao.